Build Show Live 2024 conference classes are brought to you by Builders FirstSource, Huber Engineered Woods, Pella, and Sashco. This session is sponsored by Polygaurd.
Jake Bruton here for Build Show Live 2024. The Build Show is over. This is a wrap. I want to say thank you to one of our presenting sponsors. It is Huber Engineered Woods. They are the makers of Advantech, X Factor, Zip System, Zip R, all of the accompanying products with that, all the things you know and love, and I think they are a great representation of everything that Build Show Live represents. We're trying to move the industry forward. We're trying to innovate. We are trying to be better at every turn, and I think that's a good representation of what Huber and Build Show are together, and I think it's great that they're a sponsor. They're also a good partner for us at Aero Building. We've been working with them for 20 plus years on the Advantech front, more than a decade on the Zip front. They help us build our energy efficient homes. Their tech support and their sales team are always there when we call, and I can't think of a better partner in this industry when we start talking about systems that allow us to do our job in a better format. So Huber, thank you for your sponsorship. I can't wait till next year.
For those of you that don't know me, my name is Stephanie Dailey. I'm a builder out of Salt Lake City, Utah. Most of what I do is custom stuff. We do some remodels, but if they're remodels, they're usually whole home remodels or a little bit larger scale projects. So what I'm going to do is just kind of walk you through our process to a perfect floor system and the things we use, the things we like to use differently, and maybe some of the products you guys can look into here in the show. A lot of these different brands and companies we're going to talk about are here downstairs, so they can give you a little more detailed information for your market. But I'm just going to walk you through our process and kind of how we do things. So first, I just want to let you guys know, these are our sponsors for the classroom sessions. So while you're here, make sure to stop down in the expo and say hi to them and tell them thank you, and make sure you get into as many classrooms as you can while you're here, because this is going to be a really great show and a lot of education. So we'll start off here. I gave you a little bit of background about me, but I've been in the construction industry since I was 16. I don't know much else. So I started at the age of 16 at an architecture firm. My background is primarily architecture. That's what I went to college for. That's what I thought I was going to do for the rest of my life until I got the taste of being on a job site. A lot of what I do is in that custom realm. I have kind of some weird little off things. So I started a construction software business called Jobsite Codes. That's been a really great thing for us and our job sites, and that just kind of helps with our collaboration and communication with our trades. And I joined the Build Show just over a year ago. So it's been a great year with the team. So we're going to walk through just a few things. I know you guys have probably used a lot of these products. You've probably done a lot of things like this in the past. We will open this up at the end. I think we're going to do maybe the last 15 minutes or so, Q&A. So if you have questions, just don't forget them. So first off, we don't do a lot of crawl spaces in Utah. I know if you guys watch Matt's videos, he does a lot of slab on grade stuff. Also, they do a lot of crawl spaces. We don't do a ton of that in Utah for multiple reasons. The biggest is probably because we have a frost depth where our footings have to go down a certain depth anyways. So if we're going to go down 3 or 4 feet, we might as well just put in a basement. So a lot of our houses are going to be ramblers, which would have a floor system, usually a wood floor system. In some cases, they are steel, but there is also a lot of 2-story projects in Utah. So the 2 different floor types we use primarily are going to be your floor truss and your floor joist. You guys are probably familiar with both of them. We do occasionally use, I have a project we just completed about 4 years ago that was a steel floor truss system, kind of odd, but that house was 26,000 square feet and was built more like a semi-commercial type of building. The biggest problem with that was we had 50-foot spans, and a lot of that had concrete on top of it in order to accommodate a radiant heat system. So what made the most sense in that case was like a steel floor truss. but your wood floor trusses can do a lot of great things. So the truss is good because it can span longer distances than our floor joists can. There's clearly a very big difference in size between the two. All of our floor joists are going to come in multiple different sizes and can also come in different, you'll see like the weight differences will change the different floor joist types that you can use. But the biggest reason that we're kind of shifting towards floor trusses is going to be the bigger spans. Most of our clients today don't want to see supports underneath. They don't want to see a post in the middle of a room. They don't want to see little wing walls, anything that we need to do to try and give us that mid-bearing strength, which is kind of the reason that we lead towards floor trusses. So I'm going to show you a quick little video. This is actually a project that we're currently working on in Salt Lake. This has a full floor truss system. The room that we're going to start in this video is actually 58 feet by 52 feet. The floor trusses span the full length. We have 2 steel beams that you can see in the image here that are kind of holding up mid-support. But this room we wanted completely open and no supports in the space at all. This is actually an underground car showroom, so it was important that they didn't have anything to kind of obstruct them from getting the cars around. And we'll watch this video and then we'll walk into some more details on the trusses.
Both of those areas have different flooring height changes, and it really is determined based on the client's furniture layout. So neither one of those has been touched yet because it's better for us to frame them right in the first place than it is to reframe them. So those are both going to happen today. We also want to be paying attention to ceiling drops and ceiling treatments. So in this space, you can see we've got a lot of steel beams behind me that are dropping, that are just structural. We originally thought we would tuck the floor trusses up. However, the design for that ceiling has since changed. And so what we're doing now is framing the entire ceiling in this space down. That will give us enough room that we can place can lights in a very specific grid and also get all of our HVAC ductwork through there in a pretty neat and clean space without dropping the ceiling with a bunch of different levels. So we will bring that down all to the same height and have a nice clean space.
So most of you guys probably think of using floor trusses so that you can get your mechanicals through it pretty easily. And that is a huge benefit to a floor truss. When you get your floor trusses designed, you can actually design them with whoever your lumber company is to accommodate if you have your manual J's so that you have your duct layouts already ahead of you, or if you've done some of that pre-con work to kind of know where you're going to be running mechanicals, where you're going to be running plumbing, where you might have like your electrical home runs, or if you're building those bigger houses, we tend to have a lot of wire for AV, and that stuff kind of needs a place to go as well. So the floor truss is great for that. And if you think ahead of the game, and that's probably a common thing here throughout the week, is thinking ahead of the game. And if you can think about your mechanicals before you start ordering all of your floor trusses, they can do some amazing things with them. And take advantage of that, because nothing bothers me more than walking into a house where they've used floor trusses and their ductwork is below them. There's no reason for that. There's no need for that. They will custom design these to fit everything you need inside of them. And if you get it ahead, like my lumber company is Builders FirstSource. So when I go to order my floor trusses, I can actually sit down with the truss designer and my manual J's, and they'll model them in 3D and give me the opportunity to see where everything's going. And then they can leave me a little bit of space here and there for certain things if I have a house with fire sprinklers or some more unique challenges. That's the great thing with floor trusses. But floor joist, you can still cut through. So it doesn't mean that you can't run stuff through your floor joist. We've all cut holes in our floor joist to run certain things here and there. There's just limitations. And one of the cool things about the floor truss, here's a great little example of it. We can span bigger lengths, obviously, and then we can get our mechanicals through in multiple different ways. So even through some of these webs, we're still going to fit some of the stuff we need, but if we can redesign them ahead of time, they can actually block out specific chase openings for the exact products you want to run through it. On floor joists, they can also pre-cut your floor joist or pre-drill your floor joist for certain mechanicals. You just have to know this kind of stuff ahead of time. So If you plan to use floor joists, they are going to be less expensive, which is part of the reason that a lot of people want to use the floor joist. The other reason I think a lot of people are choosing the floor joist over the floor truss is just because of the way the architect designed the house. So if you think about if the house was designed with 11 7/8 I-joists, and we choose to want to use a 16 or an 18-inch floor truss, we've now added a pretty significant change in height that we have to make up the difference in all of our staircases, and it just kind of can throw you off a little bit. So if it's not designed for them in the first place, you just have to think about some of those key things in advance. But the floor joists, we can still have some customization. So if you choose to go that direction, don't be afraid of the customization.
What's different about this one? Well, these were pre-cut for us from McCray Lumber with Boise Cascade. We gave them all our duct layouts, sat down and had a meeting. They cut everything precisely in length, including our LVLs, and then actually cut out with a CNC router for all our duct runs and all our plumbing runs.
So that is exactly what's different about it. One, it's kind of paint by number because they came to us all labeled and matching the layout. But this is really another story of planning ahead. Everything that we do as builders and project managers is about looking forward to avoid problems, to find efficiencies. Everything that we can do to squeeze every last bit of efficiency is reducing the cost to our client and, could potentially increase profits. So it's a win for everyone, but we're also trying to be sustainability minded. And that's one of the reasons we prefer working with engineered lumber when we can, because you can take a waste product and make OSB where you're not making big dimensional joists. You can still get nice long spans, nice and straight.
So one of the things I love that Catalyst and Travis has done is they've found ways to use the I-joist, but also get all their mechanicals into them. And right at the beginning of the video, he's talking about how they actually supplied their lumber company with a layout ahead of time, and they pre-cut all the joists for them before they delivered them to the job site. So many of you have probably been on job sites where they just drop off a huge load of lumber and you have all of these really long floor I-joists that you then have to cut to length. And what do we do with all those cuts? We just throw them away. There's a lot of waste in construction, and I think that's one of the things that we're all trying to do a little bit better is cut down on some of that waste. That's the beauty of the truss, is it's custom built to the exact length that you need. Most of the time with these floor trusses, they're gonna come out, in our case, where we have foundation walls, they're gonna come out after we pour foundations and measure. So our floor trusses are built exactly to what we need them to be built. But the I-joists, traditionally, they just get dropped off in a big package and you cut them to the length you need and you install them and you toss the rest in the garbage. But that's just creating more waste, and we're not being quite as sustainable as we probably should be. So I do love that Catalyst has gone ahead and ordered their I-joists in the length that they needed. They made sure that they gave them the information for all their mechanicals ahead of time, and their lumber company actually pre-cut and pre-drilled everything. I don't know about you guys, but when I'm using I-joists on a job site, there's nothing I hate more than giving the plumber and the electrician free rein to drill holes through everything, because nothing's straight, nothing's perfect. They're plumbers, they're electricians, they're not framers. So pre-cutting those is going to give you a much cleaner look. And the homeowners are noticing little things like that. You think that as they come and walk through the house, because what they're going to do is come after hours, after you've gone home, and they're going to let themselves in the house and kind of wander through. And anytime they can see something that looks clean, it looks pre-planned, it looks well done, that's just an expectation that they're going to have into the future. And there's not a lot of builders that do it that way. So even if you're going to use that I-joist, this is still a great option to give your lumber company the information ahead of time so that they can kind of customize those for you. So after we have that floor system, the next thing we have is our sheeting, right? And just raise a hands, how many of you use 3/4 sheeting? And then how many use like 1 1/8? So personally, I prefer the 1 1/8, and just biggest reason is sturdiness. I think anytime we're building these bigger custom homes, when you walk through spaces that have big spans, you can feel the deflection. Have you been in a house where you've walked through and you can feel the floor moving? That's not something your clients want, and that's going to lead to more problems when we start to get towards our floor finish material. So I prefer the 1 1/8". We do use Huber's products, Advantech products in our market, where we get a ton of snow, a ton of ice. If we're framing in the winter, it's not uncommon for us to snow blow or shovel or even put ice melt down on top of this stuff. Huber's products are made to have ice melt put on them, a specific ice melt, but they are made for that. And then you'll see this yellow product downstairs, and you can see it here in this photo here. This is Huber's new version of the Advantech that's actually called X Factor. And it basically has a built-in barrier in it, similar to the zip wall system that you've seen. I will tell you it's been nice, at least for our climate, as far as cleaning it up and still taking care of it. But it has a much better look to it, and it actually cleans up a lot easier on the job site. So if you're sweeping the job site at the end of every day, if you use OSB, you know how things can get stuck inside the wood flakes. It's just not clean, it's not great. The Advantech is fantastic, but the X Factor is just even better. And so we prefer to use that. But there's a lot of people that use CDX plywood. Just depends on what you can get and what you use in your market. But there are tons of thickness options available. I just prefer the thicker option because it's a little more durable, a little more sturdy. But it is, again, if your architect has designed the entire house with 3/4 and then you decide to put in 1 1/8", you just have to remember that you have to make up that difference somewhere. You can't just add it to that top step or you'll have your client tripping up the stairs every time. So again, our preference here is going to be the X Factor Advantech, mostly because of our winter conditions, the rain, especially when you're building these bigger houses. We have long periods of time when our houses are exposed. It's not uncommon for us to have these framed and then go 3 or 4 months wiring the house. So to leave it open, you want something that's going to stay nice, and you also don't want to just have standard OSB. If you're using like a glue and nail down hardwood or a tile down the road, if you leave that OSB exposed for too long, you're going to start to see buckling, and you're just going to add additional costs down the road of sanding and kind of leveling that floor out before you put your finished surface on. You can avoid all of that by just upgrading right from the get-go to the X Factor Advantech, because it's just going to cut that out entirely. And then the strength and stiffness of the 1 1/8", it's been really great. Again, it is a more expensive product, but if you're building those more custom forever type homes that your clients are going to live in long term, that's the way to go. They can always switch out light fixtures and plumbing fixtures down the road. They can't come back later and switch out their floor sheeting. Try and selling them some of these high performance or better products right from the get-go can be challenging, but it's worth every minute of it. So we're going to do a Q&A at the end. Do you mind holding off for it? Okay, I won't forget about you. So this project is the one that we just saw underneath. You can see this whole section over here that has the yellow Advantech already on it. That's the basketball court on a second floor. So we've spanned 58 feet by 52 feet with just 2 steel beams underneath it and floor trusses. And that's a court. So that's going to see a lot of impact. That's going to see a lot of movement. That floor is really stiff. So it's been floor trusses with 1 1/8" over the top of it, and you're not going to see deflection happening over there. The rest of the house, same thing. Floor trusses, we're still using the Advantech, mostly because that basement area is open. You're not wanting to see a lot of posts, not wanting to see a lot of drops, so that's why we did it that way, but this is just our particular method, and that's what we like to use. So, raise of hands, how many of you heat your floors? So a few of you. There are a ton of options for heat, and we'll go through this little section pretty quickly. I would say our primary way of heating floors in Salt Lake, at least in our market, is your traditional gypcrete, right? So we're putting PEX down. That's what we're kind of seeing in this top photo here. And they're heating it hydronic. So it's going through a boiler. Traditionally, people, if they're doing a hydronic heat system, are going to use their boiler to also heat their domestic hot water. So we'll have like a water storage tank instead of a water heater. So if they do go with a hydronic heat, take advantage of the fact that you've just purchased a boiler that's going to run all of that and use it to heat the domestic hot water. That can cut out the water heater portion of your costs. Even though the hydronic heat is more expensive, let's help take care of the domestic water while we're at it. There are another option, if you're familiar with warm board, that is also hydronic heat. So warm board cuts out the floor sheeting product. So we no longer put this on, and we're installing warm board. So the way they've done this is they've taken their floor sheeting product and they've actually covered the top of it in like a sheet of metal. And they pre-design, so you have to give them your layout ahead of time. They'll come in and design the different layouts ahead of time, and then they number and label the sheets. They've printed this side down on the back side of it in case people don't know which side goes up. But it's another great option. Their sales pitch is that it is less expensive. In my market, it's not, but it is a great option. The downside to me of this in my market is that they won't let me heat the domestic hot water with the boiler that I'm using for this system. So I have to just buy another water heater if I'm doing it this way. This is a great option though. Warm board also offers a remodel product. So you can actually use it on remodels, which is great. I think that's probably the best case use of this for us, is to be able to use this for a remodel. But I know a lot of our contributors use the warm board and love it. We're using it actually on our next build series project that'll be in Salt Lake. So I'm excited to use it and see it. Now the reason we're gonna use it on our next build series is because we have exterior heated concrete that we'll be using a boiler for snow melt. So I'm just gonna use that boiler to heat the domestic water. So I've kind of made up for it a little bit. I would say between the gypcrete system and the warm board system, those are probably your two most expensive. And that's usually if you're gonna do the whole house with radiant heat. You can do the electric heat like you're seeing down here on the bottom. And that one is actually done with Ditra, the Schluter Ditra product. And we use this a lot for like bathrooms. If we're just gonna heat the master bath floor, we'll use this Ditra product. And just like you can see in that photo, it just runs the cable through it. They do it in like a 3-3 layout, and it's super easy to install. You just have to let your electrician know ahead of time so you can get a conduit in the wall for your thermostat. Very affordable. The most expensive master bathroom I've ever had to put this in is like $2,600. And that's a pretty big size master bathroom. So it's not expensive, and it's a great option if your client just wants that like warm tile floor in any location. But we're usually using it in primary bathrooms. And the Ditra product comes in a few different ways. They actually can trowel and stick it down with just like a thin set, like you're seeing in this photo here. But they just did come out with this new peel and stick product, which is really great. It just like it sounds. It's a big stick, big giant sticker. And they come in sheets, so it lays out a little easier. But that's a great way to give your clients like an electric heated floor. So there's the two difference between what you would see on a gypcrete house versus what you would see in a warm board house. So once the pipes are laid down in a gypcrete house, we still have to come through and put the gypcrete down. So if you're gonna do it that way, you just need to remember that you need another bottom plate on your walls because you're gonna pour down another 1.5 inches of concrete over the top of those tubes. So if you forget that second bottom plate, you're gonna be in trouble. So I love the way that we traditionally do it, but I'm excited to try out the warm board product. I think it's a cool option. It's just different. There's lots of options available for heating. The only thing that's turned me off, like I said, of the warm board in the past is just the ability to use the boiler for other purposes. So if you're not worried about that, warm board's a great way to go. There's another great photo of the Schluter Ditra system. You can actually use it on walls too. So we're doing it a lot in these master bathrooms where we're heating benches in showers, we're heating walls in showers, just giving the client that extra like luxury comfort in their bathroom. So now that we have our perfect floor system built, we're gonna put material on top of it. We're gonna run through a few different types of material that are available. Tile installation, we just talked about the Ditra. The Ditra is great. It gives you a ton of options. There is a traditional thin set method. There's a peel and stick method. Anytime you're gonna use the Ditra, they're gonna come through and vacuum all of the floor. They're gonna scrape all your drywaller's mess off. And then they're gonna scrub the floor clean before they put the Ditra down. That's at least what their instructions say you should do. But you can even see as they come through and just vacuum the difference between the cleaned areas and the dirty areas. And that's just to try and make it stick better. A lot of these guys are using the traditional thin set method with the Ditra, mostly because I think a lot of people haven't adopted the peel and stick. I think they're a little worried about it. I think they're a little concerned that it's not going to stick. But Schluter's done a ton of research with it, and it actually works really well. And it doesn't come, it can come in a roll product, but they do it in sheets, which will let it lay easier. They ship it in a roll. It does kind of curl up, and it's harder to lay down. But they go through, cut all the Ditra, get it out in the size they need, and then all of it comes back up again before they trowel it down. So just make sure that they're creating their layout before they start actually sticking it down. There's not a huge, what they're actually laying in this photo is just the traditional Ditra. It's not the Ditra heat. And the difference between the two is just this one in my left hand is the Ditra heat. That gives you the ability to put the cable through it. The one in my right hand is traditional Ditra. So they're both great options. They both give you the underlayment that you need. One just makes it easier for you to put the heat in. Wood products. Have any of you ever put traditional hardwood floor over the top of radiant heat, like a gypcrete system? So sand and finish hardwood, true sand and finish hardwood, is not really meant to put directly on top of concrete. And I've done it, and the reason is because the concrete absorbs moisture. If you saw Matt's keynote speech, he'll tell you that we all learn through making mistakes, and that was a mistake for me. That's something I learned, and we did it different the second time. So if I have a client that wants true sand and finish hardwoods and the gypcrete system, we're going to cover the whole floor in 3/4 or 1/2 inch, and then put the hardwood floor on top of it. That makes it so we can now glue it and nail it down like you should with a traditional subfloor. Just gluing that hardwood is not the best option. So we can still use sand and finish floors on top of radiant heat, just that's another added cost that we need to remember when we're bidding the project so that we don't bite ourselves when we go to install it. Engineered wood is really common for people to put right on top of concrete, right on top of gypcrete. Most of those are just glue down. Some of them are even, there are some new engineered products that are like a floating floor system, but engineered primarily is okay for you to put on top of the traditional concrete, but if it's a glue and nail engineer, just remember you have to put the subfloor down. Sand and finish engineered are another great option. This gives you the flexibility of the traditional sand and finish hardwood, so you can create your own finish, your own color, but it's an engineered wood floor. So just depending on what your client's looking for, we'll talk a little bit about the difference between the engineered hardwood and traditional sand and finish hardwood. And then we have LVP. If you've watched any of my build show videos about LVP, you know I'm not a huge fan. But you're gonna see I have a lot of clients that use LVP. I'm okay with it as long as they understand what they're buying. I think the problems arise when the client thinks, oh, it looks like wood, it's gonna feel like wood. Well, it doesn't, it's plastic, it's not gonna feel like wood. But if you're okay with the way it feels, and you're okay understanding that LVP is kind of hollow, it's a great cost product, and they have done a really good job. So this house here is a sand and finish true hardwood product. This was a really great job. It was actually 8-inch white oak planks. I loved this job. This was really fun. Funny enough, it's funny now. It wasn't funny then. The plumber turned the water onto the house, and the line to the fridge was not capped. And so we actually tore out that whole kitchen and replaced it. But the sand and finish hardwood is one of my favorites. It's a great way to go to give you flexible color. There's another sand and finish, actually the exact same floor as this, just a different color. And again, another sand and finish hardwood. This gives you flexibility to lay cool patterns, to do different things, and to make things look different. So sand and finish hardwoods, you can refinish them a lot more than you're going to refinish an engineered wood floor. So if it's a client that's going to live in the home for a long time, I highly recommend pushing them towards traditional hardwood, especially if they have kids or if they have pets. It's a lot more durable, and they can refinish it over and over and over again. The color options are endless. That's another reason I think most people pick true hardwood versus like a pre-finished engineered, is because they can really custom design their own color. Subfloor issues. In the basements, we're not usually putting down traditional hardwood, like I said, unless we're putting a 3/4 or 1/2 inch product down so that I can glue and nail it to after. And then the wood species. When you're doing a true hardwood, you can pick just about anything. And I've seen some really fun, unique floors. That's the beauty of the sand and finish hardwood, is if you're doing these custom homes, especially like the higher end luxury custom homes, they kind of already expect to pay that price point. Sand and finish hardwood, in my opinion, is the way to go. But the cons to this is the cost is higher. We've already talked about it not being great right on top of concrete. Yes, the endless color option is also a con, because if you've ever had a client that can't make decisions, you'll know what I mean. I had a client last year who the endless wood options took her 4 months to decide what type of flooring she wanted, and while that's happening, the house is sitting. And then it took her 18 color samples before we finally just said, you bring us something you want us to match. So that can be a pro and a con, but sand and finish engineered wood looks very similar, and there are different reasons people want to use engineered wood, but if you've used it, if you're familiar with it, you know there is a wear layer. We've got our 3/4 thick solid wood flooring on the side, and engineered wood, a good engineered wood. They're not all a really good layer like this, but this one is a 3/4 wear layer. So if you're gonna buy an engineered wood product, make sure that you're familiarizing yourself with the wear layer and make sure your clients know. I like the 3/4 wear layer because then it's really kind of in the game with true hardwood, right? We can sand and refinish that a few times. One downside, traditionally with the engineered wood flooring that's pre-finished, they have like a wire brush texture. Some of them have just kind of like different textures. Your client needs to know if they're gonna sand it and refinish it, that texture goes away. It's common sense to us in this room. It's not common sense to them. So it's something to just remind them for. Surprisingly enough, at least in my market, a sand and finish engineered wood is more expensive than traditional hardwood. And then, like we talked about, less available wood to sand down and refinish. But engineered wood, again, is beautiful, gives you a ton of options, and still looks great. A lot of these are, these first two actually were finished on site. That's the same house. And then this one and this one were pre-finished before we installed them. The downside to that, you know, the wood floors get installed pretty early in construction, so you just have to protect them. And if they're pre-finished, make sure that people aren't damaging them. We did have someone who dropped a mirror on this floor and took a pretty big chunk out of one of the planks. There's no way to fix that when we come through and sand and put the final finish on, so we just tore the plank out. But sand and finish true hardwood on the right and then the engineered on the left, they still look great. You can't really tell the difference. Unless you built the house and you know what they used, it's hard to tell the difference. LVP. You know, at least in my market, I think a lot of the people that are using LVP are using it because they're trying to save cost, or they have a lot of kids and they think it's crazy durable. It can be, but it's not always. So just familiarize yourself with the wear layers on the LVP that you're going to choose to. This is actually a really good LVP. If I can't bend it, I'm okay with my clients using it. If I can flex the plank, that's a no-go. And it's mostly, I mean, you'll see some of these LVPs. I don't know if you guys have noticed as you walk through like your traditional Home Depot or Lowe's, there are LVPs that are 1/4 of an inch thick total. And I would just stay away from those unless you're trying to build something that's like crazy cost effective. They're not the best product. So familiarize yourself with the wear layer on the LVP. They are very inexpensive and they do have a ton of variety. So it's a good option if you have a client that's trying to save money. Now, most of the houses I'm using LVP, the customers know they need to save money, but they're not willing to sacrifice their main living areas. So most of the time we're comboing like a true sand and finish or an engineered and an LVP. So in this particular house, this one's actually called the Field of Dreams house on our website. The photo on the right on the main level is the engineered. The one on the left is the LVP. They look really close. It's hard to tell the difference, and honestly, most people probably wouldn't know unless They knew what they were looking at. There's another one, engineered LVP, same house, very close. I actually have an entire build show video that's on the network that's about a guide to wood flooring, and I walk you through in a little more detail than we were able to talk about here, just the different types of wear layers, how to see what the wear layer is, what the wear layers are made out of, because surprisingly enough, there are different materials that they use on LVP. Some are good, some are not quite as great, some delam, some are a little more durable, but if you want to learn a little more about wood flooring, that video is a really great video. Carpet. We don't use a lot of carpet anymore. I don't know about you guys, but it's pretty rare. Most people now are wanting to go with hard surfaces for multiple reasons, but carpet is really common to be used. There are so many options of carpet, and they are so very different. So the three top are going to be wool carpet, nylon, and a poly. You're going to see a lot of carpets like those that are blends of the two, and the reason they're blending them is because they may be trying to get the really, really soft texture of a poly, but the durability of a nylon. So it'll be like a poly nylon mix so that they can be a little more durable, but they still have the really soft comfort. There's just some quick little points on the difference between those three. There is a whole nother build show video about carpet and the difference between all of them. If your clients are gonna pick wool carpet, have you guys used wool carpet? How many of you used wool carpet? How many of you had those clients call you after they moved in because there was a problem with that wool carpet? It is not stain resistant. It's great because it's a natural product. It's long lasting. It's really comfortable, but it's just not made for people who have dogs. It's not made for tons of kids, and it's not made for people who wear their shoes in their house. So just familiarize yourself with those. I will tell you from experience, I'm sure you've all experienced this in one way or another, your clients are going to call you after they move in the home with the problems, and all of our lists of like, this is what you should do or this is what you shouldn't do on your next house comes from the problems we've seen in the past. So I've had clients call me about the wool carpet, and it's not always the best. So even I've found it really, really good lately. I'm just sharing these videos with my clients and saying, hey, educate yourself about the different types of wool carpets or different types of carpet available before we go with that wool carpet. And I'll just send them the build video and say, watch this, and then let's go carpet shopping. Because I think it does help them try and understand what's out there, what's available, and also the pros and cons. If they're looking for a really comfortable carpet, but they have kids and they want something a little more durable, they'll know to look for that blend. So the finish is not going to matter if the structure is bad. So your clients can buy the most expensive sand and finish, engineered true hardwood, and move into the home, and they're going to call you the second they move in because it's creaking and the floor's popping or all kinds of different things. Those problems usually start from the structure, the subfloor, and then our finish. That's kind of, if we're gonna sell them the really expensive floor finish product, let's make sure the structure's good. Otherwise, you guys are just gonna keep getting called back. And the goal here is to make sure they're happy, right? Oh, I went the wrong way. The goal here is to make sure they're happy, because when they move into the home, your best point of getting more business is referrals. And if they move in and realize their floor creaks and they're having all these problems, that's the first thing they're going to tell their friends when they're over for dinner. So try and make sure that you at least provide them a good structure, or at least educate them on a good structure if they want these expensive finishes. If they choose to not do the more expensive structure, at least you've educated them. Give them the option so that, just like Matt talked about earlier today, so that that attorney doesn't say you intentionally made bad decisions when you were building the house. Educate the client ahead of time. So there's tons of great options for flooring, you guys. I would highly recommend you get on Build and watch some of those more detailed videos about the wood flooring products, about the carpet products, and just feel free to share them with your clients. There are a ton of videos on the Build network that I share with my clients all the time. I use other contributors' videos, and I just like to share them so that they can kind of sit at home and educate themselves before we go shopping together. And always try and give them that information ahead of time so that they feel like they're well informed and they have the information they need to make decisions, and we didn't just intentionally set them up to fail. So thank you, guys. We'll open it up for a little bit for questions, and then maybe we'll let you get out of here a few minutes early so that you can go to your next one. Yeah, that's a great question. So that is kind of challenging because most of the time when our flat work concrete guys are pouring the basement floor, it is not level. So most common practice for us is the carpet or the LVP company will come out and actually level the floor and they will self-level it. I don't try and do that for them because they usually have a standard or a certain way they want to do it. So we do check our flat work guys and kind of put a lot of pressure on the flat work guys to try and be right, because I don't know if you've ever had the experience of, you know, the self-leveler feels and sounds hollow. So even though the floor might be perfectly level when you apply this LVP on it, if it has that hollow, like, auditory sound, people naturally think there's a problem with it. So we do use it. We do use self-leveler. I let the flooring company kind of choose how much they want to do, but I try and just put a little higher standard on the flat work guys so that I use it less. I would say probably the worst house we've ever had has been out of it like half an inch out, and that's not great, but it usually happens most around underground outlets, floor outlets in concrete. But we've been out about a half an inch before, and that's where the auditory sound of the self-leveler came in. So yeah, it's a great question. You know, I think that most brands out there now are making a wide variety of options. Like, they are offering the traditional 1/4 inch thin. They're also offering the thicker built-in subfloor, like the built-in padding. So I don't necessarily offer them like suggestions on brands as much as I say I'll usually hand them a sample of one that I approve of, like this one. This is actually one I shipped from Utah out here. If I can't bend the plank this direction, I'm okay with it. I just don't want it to be so flexible that it's going to move under their feet, because that's what they'll feel. Most brands have great options though, and they're all kind of making luxury down to more cost effective. Yeah, so the question was subfloor adhesive. We use Huber's Advantech product. The reason being is because Huber offers a squeak-free guarantee, a 10-year squeak-free guarantee if you use their whole system. So after we've got the floor trusses down, you'll see, if you watch some of the videos from Wayne Manor, you'll see they just overuse the Huber's subfloor adhesive product and just use with that, mostly because of that 10-year squeak-free guarantee. And I've actually seen Huber come out, tear out a floor, tear out the subfloor, and replace it and cover the entire cost. So they do stand behind that warranty. That's why we try and go that way. Prior to using Huber products, 10 years, even probably more recent than that, you'd see OSB or even just CDX used on our job sites all the time. Their framers kind of get particular. I don't know about you, but they kind of have their own things they want to use. I recommend Huber's products. That's just preference for me because I've seen them stand behind their guarantee. I think a lot of people offer guarantees like that and don't stand behind them, but I've seen them do it, so I'm kind of on board with the Huber stuff now. So. Yep. Great questions. So the span, I would say it matters less to me about the span and more, I would say anything over maybe 26 feet is when we're going to go with 1 1/8 inch. Most of the decision to change to 1 1/8 inch is based on the clients and how long they plan on living on the house, because it is a pretty significant cost difference between the two. I try and always tell them, like, this is my standard. This is what I would do if I were building my own home, and let them make the decision. So even at lesser spans, I've had clients use the 1.1 just because they want that solid, not even the deflection, but just it feels more sturdy. So I kind of always try and push them that direction, but I would say anything over 26 feet, you'll physically feel a difference. And then vapor barrier, I always use Stego's product. And actually in Utah, interestingly enough, they fight a lot because we don't have affordable housing in Utah. Our cost of living is really high. And so the State Home Builders Association is fighting the government to bring some of the new energy code down, which we're all pro the new energy code, but I see where they're coming from. They're trying to make it so there's some more affordable houses. So they knocked the vapor barrier down from a 15 to a 6 mil. We always try and stick with 10 at a minimum. Stego offers 10 and 15. The reason I go with Stego's product rather than just buying like a plastic product from Home Depot or something is it is a lot more durable. So usually our process is we have 12 inches of footing. I'll put all of our underground plumbing in. We'll do if we have underground mechanical, do some underslab ductwork sometimes. And then we'll fill that footing halfway. And then we put our radon system in. And then we fill the footing the rest of the way up. And then we'll put the Visqueen or the Stego product down and then pour our slab. I will tell you, and I don't know how many of you have had this problem, my concrete flatwork guy fights me on this because he says that the vapor barrier is causing cracks in the concrete because the water can't go down. It's got to evaporate up. I don't know if that's true, but he recommended on the next one that we try and put it down under at least 1 inch of gravel. So we're going to try and mess with that a little bit. But they do crack, but I think all concrete cracks, in my opinion. Yeah, so we don't do a ton of the insulation, under slab insulation in Utah either, but typically under, at least in my opinion, because I think that when we are using EPS, like under slabs, if I can get clients to let us use that, I just think that that stuff sitting in water is a really terrible idea. So I try and protect it from it as much as I can. There are a lot of people now, I don't know if you guys have been do spray foam, like closed-cell foam under your slabs. There's a lot of people in our market now that are doing that lately too, which seems like it might be a good idea, but I would put it under, but it's a good point. I mean, I think most of the insulation people are putting a piece of plastic down over the top of them, even when they're done, so it's kind of sandwiched between two vapor barriers, but we would probably put it on top of the Stego and then maybe under its own plastic. I wouldn't, because I think the reason that I'm choosing the X Factor product is usually I'll use the regular Advantech product all day if we're framing in the summer. I have no problem with that. I'm always going to use this if I know the house is going to be exposed in the winter. Or like during springtime for us, where it's like our rainy season. We don't get a lot of rain in Utah. But I think if it's going to be exposed to water for long periods of time, I would go with this product. If it's not, if we're framing it in the summer, just use the Advantech. It's a great product. There's no reason why you wouldn't. They both offer the same guarantee. It's just the X Factor kind of helps protect us a little more in those wet seasons. Some people do. I think it depends on how you build your exterior walls if you're balloon framing or traditional framing. There are a lot of people that'll go through and caulk them if you have time. There are some people that just tell you that's not that big of a difference. I've done both ways and blower door tested houses both ways. I can tell you that I can't attribute any change to that specific item. We've started now kind of like implementing or taking away one item in all of our blower door tests, not something that would make a significant difference in the quality of the build, but just little items like that to try and like self-test to see if we're seeing a difference. And that's actually one we did on our last job, and I didn't see a difference between caulking. We blower door tested it before and after we caulked. There wasn't a difference. So I think it's preference. Great question. You can. So if you are working, I try to get involved with the architect and the engineer ahead of the actual construction process because I feel like we all offer valuable information for them that they don't have. If I'm in those rooms while they're designing the home, I will always recommend 1.125 inches. And in that case, their structural engineer will tell us how far apart we can span without compromising deflection and that movement. So if you do go with the thicker subfloor, you can actually separate the trusses or joists a little more, but I leave it up to the structural engineer, but I have a minimum. So I want no deflection. So I want to be really, really low on their deflection scale. You'll see some architects that'll put like even I-joists at 18 inches on center. I won't, like, especially with an I-joist, I won't go that far apart. I don't care like the length we're going. I want them 16 or smaller just because I feel like you can feel the movement. So because in the way Utah does it, the structural engineer is the one that stamps the plans. I'll give them, my request is I don't want to feel movement in the floor at all. Here's what I plan on using. And then I'll let them engineer it the way they want to. But closer, that'll work better, at least for movement. But then your mechanical guys don't love you quite as much. So try and find that happy medium. But you can, if you're trying to cut costs, you can separate them a little more if you're using the thicker subfloor. The 3/4, you could do that as well. Yep. Yeah. Yep. 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 Footing first and then the wall second. That's what we do. Yeah, so in Utah, we will pour all of our footings in one pour and then come back and pour the walls separately. So we just have rebar that comes up and sticks up, and then when we pour walls, that's kind of our connect point to the footings. It is common for us to have on really steep lots where we'll have a concrete floor meet a wood floor surface. And in that case, we usually just have a full height foundation wall underneath it that goes down to the bottom of where that second, whatever that second story is, whether it's a crawl space or a basement. And it is traditionally a spread footing, so even on both sides. No. Yes. Before you pour the slab. Yeah. We do. Kind of depends on location. So we always put a footing drain around our houses. Yes. It kind of depends. So we have spread footings. We'll usually put the footing drain on the outside of the foundation wall before we backfill everything. You're going to waterproof that foundation wall. Sometimes you'll use a dimple mat depending on how high your water table is. But if the water gets there, it's going to go down the foundation wall, across the footing, and into the footing drain and get it out. The footing drains are so cheap. I would put them everywhere just to protect yourself. I would use them. Yeah, we use them for sump pumps and stuff all the time if it's got a high water table. Yep, it's cheap. It's very cheap insurance, and for you to come back and fix that later is a big deal. And the wall? Yep. Yeah. It gets waterproofed. So the way that we do them, at least in Utah, the footings will get poured with the rebar up. We'll come back and put the walls in after so they're connected. They don't typically caulk or seal that joint because the wall, before we backfill anything, that whole wall in our climate gets sprayed with like a 40 or 60 mil waterproofing product. Utah's code actually says we just need to damp proof it. But I think most custom builders in Utah use waterproofing because they see the value of if that water does get in, that's an expensive fix for us. That's very, very cheap. Even on the Wayne Manor house that you saw, it's like a 12,000 square foot footprint. The waterproofing bill on that house for a 60 mil waterproofing was like $8,000. I don't think they're here. If I were you, I would look up like the Watchdog products are the ones that we like to use. It's called Watchdog Tough and Dry. Yeah, it's basically your waterproofing product. And then if you choose to use a dimple mat, if you're in an area that has a high water table, we'll use a dimple mat over the top of it just to give that water an easy path down to the footing drain. Yeah, you gotta pre-plan those heights so that they match up right. Yeah, sometimes they'll bear these trusses on the foundation wall. Sometimes actually in that case where they're meeting up with a concrete floor, they'll actually use the interior framed wall as a bearing point. So it just depends on how you want those two to come together and how the engineer, it's at least in the way in my mind, what you're thinking about doing is it would make more sense for the concrete slab to come over the top of the foundation and then to actually have the floor joist or truss bear on a framed wall next to it so that they line up. They get set into, yeah, so we actually notch out the foundation wall so that those steel beams could sit inside the foundation wall pocket. Any more questions? Great question. So if I'm going to do an entire house with a radiant heat system, that's my primary heat source. And it'll keep the house super comfortable and really nice. But there's still a forced air system in the house. Because if I have a party and I open up my giant wall of sliding doors so that everyone can come in and out, that radiant heat system will take days to catch back up. So having that extra forced air system, you're going to have it, at least in our climate, you'll have to have it anyways for air conditioning. So having it as supplemental heat source, if we're having a party or something and there's doors open, people in and out, that actually helps so that it catches the heat back up. But it's plenty. I mean, it'll heat the whole house just fine and very comfortable. It's not, with a forced air system, how it ramps up and things get warm and then it cools off and then it ramps up again. With a radiant heat system, it's just like a constant warmth. And because you're on heat surface, you just naturally feel a little warmer. So we always have both systems, but it is efficient enough to heat. Yeah. Yes. So, because I only build in Utah, I'll tell you about how we do it. Yeah, the front porch is typically 3 or 4 inches lower than the main floor height. However, that house you just saw a video of, they're flush, but that client knows what he's in for. We'll just have to keep the snow. It's actually a heated front porch, so the snow will never pile up there anyways. But we do traditionally like to keep them 3 or 4 inches lower so that if snow does get up there or water or whatever, it's not getting into the house. Now, the way that we're usually pouring our porch caps is concrete over B-decking, like a steel B-decking. But that's usually because we have like a cold storage space underneath. It does get waterproofed and sealed before the concrete gets poured. But that's usually the way we're doing them. In Utah is with a concrete, or a steel B-decking, and then the concrete porch cap gets poured on top of that. Thank you. The B-decking itself is actually just sheet steel. Yeah, we usually pour an 8-inch porch cap. Yeah. Thank you. There was one more question back here, I think. Yep, yeah. Yeah, I'll go back here just a little bit. We use Detra underneath all tile. There's 2 different Detras. There's Detra and there's Detra Heat. Detra is just an uncoupling membrane. We'll use it underneath all tile. So this house happens to be 8,000 square feet of tile on the main floor. There's no hardwood in this house, it's all tile. So we use the uncoupling membrane, just the traditional Detra underneath the tile everywhere. I just think it gives you a much better surface to start with, and it makes that tile adhere better. And Detra is really inexpensive, and most of the tile guys kind of prefer this product, so it's usually the best thing to use. But we'll use it under like any tile, anywhere. Yeah, they actually have a sealer. So after you vacuum and clean it, they have a sealer product that they want you to clean it with and then use the peel and stick. And Schluter offers like a full suite of products to make that happen for you. There's one more question, and then I'll let you guys go so you're not late for your next class. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, most of your LVP products are going to have a lot of transition pieces as well. So whether it's a T-mold, I kind of like, there's one that's called a T-mold that, like, let's say the LVP is down here and the tile's up here. It actually has a lower kind of piece on it, so it'll allow you to make up the difference easily. Schluter does make a lot of transition products, and they come in, I don't know, I think they have 30 plus colors and textures, which are great. But I try and stick with the wood products. I just feel like they're not quite as abrasive if you hit your foot on them or something. But most LVP companies will offer matching transition pieces to accommodate just that. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming. I hope you have a great Build Show Live. And if you need anything else, I'll be around for a few more minutes.
It's been a great week here at Build Show Live in Austin 2024. I want to thank one of our project underwriters, Polygaurd, who is providing this content from our classes, which were amazing in client management, building durability, and building science, where Polygaurd has been a leader in air and water management for a long time. We've used a lot of their below-grade water management solutions, but they brought out some great new stuff from their termite prevention to their air control products. Polygaurd's been solving things for builders for a really long time, and we're grateful that they're still working to make our lives easier every day. Thank you to Polygaurd, and thank you for your continued support of our educational content.